Welcome, Vin Infante, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. So today I have you on as a mindset and performance coach, and near and dear to my heart, mindset. I love mindset. I talk about mindset probably every day. My wife probably says, you talk about mindset too much. And I say, if I didn't, then I'm going to be a mindset coach. And I love bringing on other mindset coaches because we always have a different perspective. I can talk to a different mindset coach about the same topic, and everyone has a different take on it, or they have a different way around things. And that's why it's so important to understand what type of coach you're going to be working with and the personality, the energy levels, and so on. I mean, I can talk to you all day about the work that you do, but in your own words, can you tell the audience who you are, what you do, and how you help?
All right, great. So I am Vin Infante. I am a mindset performance coach, but I also am a therapist and a mentor. And I work with high performers, people that are in the C-suite, people that are entrepreneurs, people that have already achieved some level of success, but are still aware that there is always another level, because that's near and dear to my heart. So we meld well, we have good synergy. My approach is a little bit different than most coaches because of my background in therapy. I don't shy away from digging into people's past and really helping them overcome significant blockages and things that they've dealt with in their life. So I do a bit of a hybrid combination service when working with people. You get the therapist, you get the mentor, you get the coach. When you get one of the three is not really a specific thing. I just show up, and I think that's what a lot of good coaches do, right? Is I just show up, I see what you need, I see what comes up, and then you're going to get one of those three people depending on what you need in that moment.
Nice. So a little bit of being bipolar, but being bipolar for a good reason, but helping people out with mindset therapy. And I wrote a blog on this years ago, I think at this point, the difference between a mindset coach and a therapist, right? In your experience, what would you say is the difference between someone who doesn't have a therapy background, the difference between someone who's just a mindset coach versus someone who's just a therapist?
It's funny because when I left therapy, I had a lot of therapists kind of have some arrogance when looking at coaches. I don't know if you know this, but they're like, who are these people with their $20 online certifications? I have 6 years of college and a license, right? And so I had a little bit of that when I first stepped into coaching. I was like, this is going to be easy. I'm way more qualified than any coach anyway. And it did not go well. I got fired by my first executive client because they were just like, you can't help me. And I was like, I see that. And so it really challenged me to get a lot more into what exactly is coaching. And so I've come to understand it in a few different ways. And I think the best description is this: a therapist really sits with you and meets you where you're at and tries to analyze your past and see why you're at where you're at. A coach might occasionally ask about, like, oh, what's this about? Like, why do you think this way? And then, of course, that will invariably lead into a past experience or some sort of identity shift or a persona or whatever came up in your life. But you don't really spend much time there. And so I've come to learn the therapist meets you where you were, and the coach will really challenge you to raise the standards of your life and focus more on getting to that next level. And oftentimes, the coach will, I don't want to say they shy away from the past, but I have noticed most coaches will really be cognizant of the fact that if they're going into the past, they might encounter some stuff they're not really prepared to encounter. And so a lot more of them have an aversiveness to going into the past with clients. And so I believe that's really the biggest thing, right? Is the therapist is digging in the past and figuring that stuff out. Your coach is meeting you where you're at, but challenging you to get more towards your future. And I think that's the best way to describe it.
I definitely agree with that because a therapist is going to be dealing with the emotional level of it and like, tell me about your emotions, how you're feeling about that versus I don't care how you're feeling about that. We got some work to do. And it's kind of like a kick in the butt when it comes to coaching. And fortunately for me, I have a coaching background because of my education, being a teacher. And then also I was a swim coach for several years before I even became a teacher. So I learned how to be a coach or how to coach individuals. Not everyone has the skill automatically. So sometimes when I know people want to be life coaches, right? So all of a sudden they're coming from a 9 to 5 job. They were an accountant. You know what? I'm just going to be a life coach. I'm just going to go to this, certification. And now I'm a life coach and I know how to coach. Well, they try it out for a couple months. They realize they're not good at it. Why? Right? Because you don't know how to coach people. Yes, you have a fancy certificate saying you know how to coach people, but it takes years of practice or of trial and error. For me, my first months of coaching swimming, I mean, I knew how to swim, right? Like I didn't drown or anything. I could teach the kids how to not drown, but did I know how to coach them? Like I had a wonderful mentor who was the boss and the owner of the company where he helped me, put me, he brought me under his wing and he taught me how to coach, how to help. And then it was even easier when I went into the school system. So I went into public schools. I already know how to coach. I already know how to teach and know the content. And now it's just like a walk in the park. Some teachers have issues with behavioral things. I didn't have that. Some teachers have issues with time management. I didn't have that, all because of my background. And it's important that we understand the background of the coaches, where they came from and where they are now. So for me, I grew up in ghetto, went to private schools. My mom put me in private schools, working 2, 3 jobs to make ends meet. So I had a very sheltered but privileged upbringing, right? A lot of hardship along the way, but I learned to appreciate that versus someone who might just have that entitlement aspect of everything was given to you. So everyone can have a different path, is basically what I'm trying to say. And what I wanted you to do is to tell us your path from where you came from and who you are today.
Well, that's a long path, man. It all started when I was like 5. But honestly, like sort of joking, but also sort of not, because my whole life I'd been bullied. And it really did start as early as like kindergarten, first grade, innocent bullying. Getting into middle school was less innocent. High school, it was like thrown in trash cans kind of stuff. I had dealt with a lot of my own anxiety, depression, panic attacks. I was diagnosed. My therapist was like, "Oh, you have, generalized anxiety disorder. You have major depressive disorder. You have panic disorder." Like, and I'm sitting here and it's so interesting, right? Because as I look back, it's so crazy how therapists love to, like, they have to give labels, but they also love to give labels, right? And I've come to learn in my future work that labels are the worst thing you could give someone because you're giving them an identity. People love to be consistent with their identity. And that is one of the biggest things that enables people to stay stuck. So I never really paid too much mind to it when I was younger. And I really tried to figure out ways to get back to a state where I can get control over my life. I didn't know why I was so depressed. I didn't know why I was angry. I didn't know why I was sad. I didn't know why I was anxious. I didn't know why I was having these panic attacks. Because, I mean, what teenager would? Right. And so as I started getting older, I began to like understand. And I had this moment at about 23. And this was after a lot of stuff, man. I could get into the details if you like, but I feel like we could spare some time. And at 23, I had this life altering moment where I was looking in the mirror at myself and I was just tired. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. You probably heard that before. I knew something had to change. I still couldn't figure out what. And then it just hit me. You see, there was an interesting moment in my life where I wrote Vincenzo on everything. All of my school diplomas, all of my school grades. I introduced myself as Vincenzo. But the thing is, that's not my name. The thing is, my name was Vincent. And I did this because I was not willing to accept Vincent. I didn't want to accept being this loser that was bullied and unpopular and had no friends and no girlfriends and couldn't, get anywhere in life. And so I created this other person, but this other person still wasn't me. It was a false identity, but it was more so me just trying to run away from something. In this moment at 23 years old, I had looked at myself in the mirror and I feel like I finally figured it out because for the first time in 8 years, I said my own name. I'm like, "You're Vincent." And that was such a powerful moment for me because I like let that part of me go and it was just dying inside of me. And when I did that, I could tell you I never felt more peace than that one moment in my life. And my depression went away, my anxiety went away. I stopped having panic attacks after that. And obviously there's way more in there, but that was the start of all of it. That was the first time I aimed to take my power back in my life. And I said, "You know what? I am Vincent. Everything that's happened has happened. Everything that's currently going on is a result of all the decisions I've made, good or bad, doesn't matter. But everything has happened and led to this moment. And I've been suffering. I've been suffering for 15 years. But you know what? After this moment, I could choose. I don't have to suffer anymore." And this started me on an unintentional path because I didn't know what I was doing at 23. It is to me, it was how do I put this? It was a moment of grace. I don't know if anybody out there is very spiritual, any of the listeners, but for me, that was God basically giving me what I needed in that moment. I was finally just open to something else because I knew my life wasn't working for me. And I had dealt with a lot of suicidal thoughts and ideation, and I used to cut myself because I didn't know how to deal with it, right? And so it was that moment of grace that I think really led me on this trajectory. From the time I was 18 to 28, I'd worked in all these different settings. I was an inpatient, outpatient, hospitals, clinics, homeless shelter, private practice, Department of Education, applied behavioral analysis, traveling home therapist. And I did all of these things and nothing really fit. And when I say nothing fit, it's like I felt like I liked helping people and working with them, but therapy was missing something. And so I started getting curious. I was like, who's really helping people transform? And how can I become better? How can I teach people and help more? And I stumbled upon Tony Robbins. And so I got my coaching cert under Tony Robbins. And I also became a firefighter. And I basically had three careers in 3 years. And I was just figuring myself out. And while I was figuring myself out, I was also learning new and exciting ways to help others. And so that's kind of the really abridged version, because I don't want to take too much, but that's the really abridged version of the guy that's sitting in front of you.
It's important for people to understand that too, because everyone has their own journey. Everyone has their own circumstances that they allow to take over their life. And they say, this is my life and my life sucks. And they go on with this whole pity story and they're now victims. And we need to make sure that just because we were given a bad hand or we are in a certain circumstance, it doesn't mean that our life is inherently bad. Life is good. Life has meaning. When people ask me, what's the meaning of life? And I say, well, life has no meaning, right? But in life, you have the opportunity to create meaning. So sometimes in the beginning, especially, you might not be the popular kid. You might be being made fun of and bullied, but where you end up is up to you. And it's important that you understand that because at some point, you're going to separate from all those people. I can't even tell you the last time I spoke to someone from my high school. It is not that I don't like them. It's just that you grow apart. My high school is in Connecticut. I'm in Texas right now. So of course, I doubt many people are going to just come to Texas and just hang out over here or move here. Is right. It's going to be. And I was in a small high school. I think we only had 90 people or 98 people for the graduating class. So that shows that the class was a small class. So the people that I was around, it doesn't necessarily matter if they were in my life at one point or weren't in my life at any point, because now they're not in my life anymore. So I get to choose who I want to be. I get to be Michael. I get to be whatever name I want to give myself. And you're right. We do give ourselves an identity. And that identity is that top building block, right? So stages of development for anyone who's new to the podcast, you have your behavior, your environment. Then we go to values and beliefs. And the top part is identity. The identity is a critical point. And I don't say that to, make a pun on the pyramid, but it is a critical point because now you have just encompassed everything that you have learned. And then you said, this is who I am. So if you're a victim, this is who I am. If you are popular, this is who you are. If you're a jock, this is who you are, right? That becomes who you become. So later down the road, maybe you're in college, and you're playing football. You get hurt. No more football. You lose that identity. You're no longer a football player. You are injured, right? So now you're struggling. Who am I? What am I going to do next? This was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. We think only in the now, especially when we're younger. We don't see the future as like, okay, I'm going to do this. We say, well, this job makes money. I'm going to do this. And then you do it a little bit and you're like, I don't really like it. You switch it, right? That's why so many young individuals right now will go into a major and then not even work the major when they get out of college. It's because they didn't even know what they were getting into. So the identity that they thought they were building, when they finally have to live it, they say, I don't like this. So we have to know where we're going to some extent. And that is why having a coach is important, not because they're going to tell you your identity, but because they had that trial and error before. Most people who are coaches, they had some trial and error in their life, and they want to instill the wisdom that they have learned over the years onto others. So you don't have to go through all the hardships that we went through. It's a little bit of selflessness, but then a little bit of understanding that we can help you get further ahead than we were. So the idea of identity is so important. How do you help people who have lost their identity reclaim their identity? Do you have any methods, tips, or tricks, or is there a process that you typically follow?
I think it's very dependent on where the person's at in their life, because I would say one of the biggest things is how do you convince somebody that they need to figure out a different identity if they believe so strongly that their current identity is who they are? And so I would say there's multiple levels to it, right? It's like you have somebody who's aware they're not happy with who they are and they're capable of more. That's really easy. I think that working with that person's probably the easiest because they are already probably experiencing some sort of pain in their life that's so great. They know like this can't be it. So they're open. They're open to, you could be like, hey, maybe you want this out of life. And they're like, yeah, maybe. And it's very easy to work with those guys or girls. Then you have the second person who they're aware that some things in their life aren't working out, but they think for the most part it's okay and like that's normal. And then the rest of their life is good. So you have to kind of convince them a little bit that there's these parts of them that are only present or the problems are only present because there's a slight lack of alignment. Like maybe they're in their area, like for me, for example, right? Therapy was my life was pretty good because I like helping people. I like the one to one, but there was something missing. So there was some misalignment where I maybe could have been a better therapist if I had done X, Y, and Z, but I didn't feel like I wanted to do these things because I just wasn't in love with therapy enough, right? So that's the second person. I think the third person is just completely unaware. The third person is like, no, I'm not the problem. Life sucks. Everybody sucks. People are picking on me, right? The victim mentality. And they don't believe that their identity is the reason their life sucks. And so I would say there's like that middle awareness, low awareness, and high awareness. And these are the three types of people. So everyone will require a different tool. With the first person I mentioned, the one who's very open, I like to do so I have my own version of a vision board, but I call it a mission board because one, there's a little bit more power in there. And two, is we do a few different elements. Like, for instance, we get very clear on who is it that you want to become. That person is very ready to be more future oriented. So that work will take place there. With the middle person, it's more about understanding what gets them fully aligned. What is it that they truly value? What would make them happy every day? So that's a little bit of vision planning, but I think it's also more of creating who are you right now and what continues to fill you up because you already have those things. So you're halfway there. So it's more of a present focus. And then the other one is kind of jumping into the past. And that's where a lot more of the therapy work comes in. And I'll sit there with people and I'll be like, so you believe life sucks. You believe everything sucks. Everybody's targeting you. You're a victim, this and that. Why do you believe these things? And this is like that massive deep dive into their belief systems and really figuring out like where's the root to all of this behavior coming in. So I'm not even concerned with that person's present or future because there's nothing there for us right now. It's like there's a complete wall, and if I were to ask them about who they want to be and what their future is, it's like, hey, just keep walking into this brick wall. I'm sure we'll get through it eventually because that's how it works, right? So that's going to be more, I need to go to Home Depot with this person, figure out like what we need to break down this wall and why was it built in the first place and where did the bricks come from and how did you even get this thing? That would be my kind of strategies or my tools with the three different kinds of people I listed out.
I remember a client I had a couple years back now. They told me a time when they went to a therapist and they said that they went there to understand their emotions and feelings or something like that. So the therapist asked, so what are you feeling? And the guy is like, I wouldn't be here if I knew. So it's kind of like sometimes people don't even know what they're supposed
Yeah.
to be feeling or are they feeling. And I mean, men have a more difficult time in this area than women. It's just that we have been told all our lives to suppress our emotions. And it's like, okay, we can be sad, angry, or happy. That's it. If we really break it down, right? Like those are the acceptable norms, right? We can't maybe be compassionate, vulnerable, those emotions, right? We can't feel them, but we can. It's just that we're told not to, right? Men don't cry, right? Get up, rub some dirt on it, something like that, right? It's a different beast, right? That's why there's so many women going out, becoming coaches for women, empowering women, stepping into their power versus men. It's a little bit more, okay, I'm going to put my feet in. All right. Yeah, you know how to swim. All right. But I'm going to tiptoe into the pool rather than doing a cannonball.
Good point.
It takes a lot longer for men, especially, to accept that they need some help or they need some guidance. Do you find in your profession that men are more difficult to get to than women, Or do you find that there's a balance in your clientele who are looking for mindset work and therapy work?
Interesting enough. I find that men aren't that hard to reach. I believe that most men want help, but they don't know how to ask for it and they don't know how to get it. So, and also to play on your point of the different dynamics in society, men are so not used to being cared for. So when I come in, I'm like, hey man, I want to help you out. How can I make your life better? Like, I just want to be here. I'll love, I'm gonna love you, man. Like, you're gonna be my best friend, and I got you. And like, whoa, that sounds great. Like, nobody gives a shit about me. This is good. So I think men are actually extremely open. Funny enough, I feel like I've met more resistance from the women clients I've had. And not because I'm a big intimidating man, but because most successful women, and I don't want to say all because I don't have experience with all, but most successful women, or at least the ones I've come across, are very heavily trapped in their masculine energy. And they try to do and be everything just like a man. So instead of actually being open to taking some advice or feedback from me, it's more like an ego battle. And it's like, what are we fighting about? I've actually met more resistance from my women than my guys. And I think that's interesting because I've also come to learn when women are trapped in their masculine energy, it's because they've learned that their feminine energy isn't respected. Their vulnerability isn't cool, kind of like a man, right? And they've learned vulnerability isn't cool. It doesn't work for me. People take advantage of me. Guys take advantage of me. And now I'm coming in. I'm like, hey, if you tried this thing different, and now she feels like she has to defend herself to me too, because I'm just another guy and that's a part of her narrative, right? And so I've seen that that's actually been more of the interesting dynamic. However, when you finally kind of break down that masculine energy that at least my women clients have given me, underneath there is this feminine energy, this woman who wants to be more expressive, who wants to come out, and you really have to work to earn that trust with women. Guys, it's so much easier. Guy come in, we'll just bullshit a little, and then he'll be like, oh, this guy's cool, I want to work with him. A woman is like, show me why I should even consider you. And I'm like, okay, because I want to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very interesting thing. And there was one thing that also popped into my mind. I want to just share with you interesting dynamics in society. When a woman walks around with her child, you don't really think too much of it, right? But I have an 11-month-old daughter now. And I notice, sometimes she'll be a little fussy at restaurants, and I'll take her for the walk around the restaurant, give her the tour, let her hi at people, right? And everyone's staring at me, and not in a bad way, right? But I'll even notice, like, my girlfriend will get up, she'll go for a walk with our daughter. Maybe some people notice, like, oh, it's a cute baby, right? But I'm walking, everyone's staring at me. Everyone's staring at me. And maybe some of the guys there with their girls are giving me a mean look, like, bro, you're making us all look bad, right? But it's interesting because I do notice there's not supposed to be like, I love my daughter. I got this picture right here. This motivates the hell out of me. And I love the hell out of her. And I'm all over her. Like, I'll be like, Sage, daddy's love of my life, walking around with her, like cuddling on her, holding her. And it's so interesting because first up, I want to do that. Like, that's my daughter, man. And number two is people will see that and they're like, wow, you're so affectionate and compassionate with your daughter. And I'm like, of course, I freaking love this thing. What do you mean? Why is this so weird? And it's so interesting because I don't see my girlfriend get those responses, but I do.
First off, you are extremely intimidating, so I don't want you to think that you're not. All right. As soon as I saw the video, I said I better watch out. Better be careful what I say here. All right. Vin's gonna get me. That's what I said, but I know I can hold my own. I agree with you on that aspect of if a man has a child, they get looked at differently. I have a 7-month-year-old, and or not year old. I have a 7-month old, and we haven't reached the years yet, but soon enough we'll get there. Whenever I'm holding him, I hold him just like a little bag. I just like put him under my arm and we just go places. So he just like hanging out, and everyone's just like, "Oh my god,
Love it.
that's so cute." Yeah, it's a different dynamic, I would say, because when my wife holds him, people look because he has like a lot of hair. He's like a Tarzan baby, and they're like, "Oh my god, it's so cute," right? But it's a different dynamic when I do it. I get
Different.
probably like
Yeah.
2 or 3 times more eyes. You said something interesting about how women can be stuck in their masculine energy,
Masculine.
and
Mhm.
I wanted to talk to you about the difference in culture right now, because if we look at the whole
Sure.
feminism movement, grandmas told their daughters and their granddaughters, you don't need a man, go out, get a career, protect yourself, do what you have to do, right? Career first, family later, right? Family later.
Sure.
So they became masculine, or they had masculine energy, masculine-esque energy. And what
Mhm.
had happened with that is that men saw that, oh, women are showing up. So I don't have to show up because they're handling it, right? So they want to go Dutch on a date. I don't have to pay the whole thing.
Sugar mama.
Yeah, right. I can make that happen. So what men did was like, okay, I'm not going to show up. Not saying that men are not masculine anymore. It's just that they will choose to be more feminine if they had the choice. All right. Because being masculine is very stressful, very draining. There's a lot of responsibility to there. And that's why women who eventually get into their mid to late 30s start to think, maybe I want a family now. Maybe I want to settle down. Maybe I should be a little bit more feminine for the right guy, of course. So
Of course.
they switch so drastically. But at this point, men have already learned how to be feminine. They don't have to be masculine. And the great thing about it is they don't have to have commitment. They don't have to say, well, I have to give you a ring in order to get my sex. I can get my sex and not give you a ring. So, yes, women still control sexual access, but men now control the relationship. A woman can get a man, but can she keep a man? And if she has
Mm.
masculine energy, she's going to be less likely to keep a man, because if she has masculine energy, there's a good probability that she's going to be very difficult to deal with. I coach a lot of single men in their 20s, and I always ask, what type of woman do you want? You want traditional, or do you want a modern? Or do you want a mix between the two? Typically, they all say traditional. Very rare they say modern or even a mix. I help them choose to mix eventually, because they're like, it's very hard to find a true traditional woman.
Mhm.
So they
Yeah.
say, I want a traditional woman. I said, okay, well, you're going to have to go through a lot of modern women before you find your traditional woman. They're out there. It's just rare. So eventually they say, okay, well, maybe traditional is too much work. I'll settle for a modern, traditional, in the middle type woman. I said, okay, cool. If she's leaning more to the modern side, this is how we act. If she's leaning more to the traditional side, this is how we act. It's like a game plan. And it's crazy, but it works so well. If they're more traditional, you can be a traditional guy. But if they're more modern, you have to be a more modern guy. So if they're modern, you're not going to text them. You're not going to call them. You're just going to be that jerk. For some reason, it works. Why do you think that type of mentality works versus the traditional, oh, I'm going to buy you flowers and I'm going to take care of you, to that modern woman? But if you have a modern guy approaching that modern woman, it works so much better. Do you think it's a culture thing or a psychology thing?
I think it's a psychology thing with the energies, right? So when you're speaking on this, one of the biggest things that comes to my mind is if you're doing the traditional thing and you have a traditional woman, it's seen as you're compassionate and caring, but she already knows you're extremely masculine. So she already respects you. If you are not a traditional man and she is not a traditional woman, she doesn't have the awareness or the respect that you are masculine. And she's looking at you like you might be a little bitch. Like, oh, look at this guy. He's not a leader. He's not masculine. And here he is getting me flowers and pining after me. It's not respectable. There's nothing admirable about that. She won't want you. And so it really is, it depends about the energies that the woman carries, right? If I've actually seen this a lot too, is I get these women and they'll vent to me. They'll be like, I'm super successful and no man wants me. And the only men I get are losers. And then you have these guys who are super successful and they don't want me, but they want these dumb, dainty women that don't do anything and blah, right? And like I'm letting her go. I'm just like, okay, keep going, keep going. And she finishes her rant. And I say, let me ask you something. Do you think a very strong masculine man wants to go out and date a very strong masculine man? And she's like, what? I was like, you heard me. Do you think that they want that? Do you think they want to fight to make all of the decisions and all of the things in life and get all the things they believe they deserve and then fight with somebody who believes the exact same thing? She's like, well, I guess not. I was like, okay, well, you are the other man right now. It's like no masculine man will want that. A masculine man, a true masculine man, wants a feminine woman. And here's the kicker. It's not to say you can't be masculine. Masculine has its place in certain areas, like in the workforce. If you're masculine in the workforce and you're a woman, you're probably running a company 100% of the time. But if you bring that home with you, that's not going to work. So, you know, the guy that's going to be able to deal with that, a very feminine man who has nothing to bring to the table. And then we're going to deal with this dynamic, which I come across often. Very successful woman in her masculine dating a guy that she thinks is a loser, right? Because he doesn't do anything, he doesn't bring anything to the table, there's no initiative, but that's the only guy that will deal with that energy. You need a passive feminine man to deal with your masculine energy, right? And so we talk about that. And vice versa for the woman, right? They, if they're going to be in their feminine, they need a guy that's going to lead. I think one of the biggest issues that a lot of men have nowadays with getting a traditional woman is they're not traditional themselves. Guy be like, I want the woman that does the cooking and the cleaning and the laundry and the this and the that, but she should also do 50-50. Well, what where is your traditionalness? She shouldn't be doing 50-50 of anything if you're a traditional man. So let's just say you're a modern man too. Fine. But then you have to, and I like that you bring it up, then you have to adjust how you're going to act in the dynamic. Know that you are not in your true traditional masculine role, and she should not be in that. If you're saying let's do 50-50 and you still have those expectations, you're wrong. So that's a big part of it. And then I think the last piece is like, where do people want to be? Like most of the time, the woman's going to be in that masculine energy because she doesn't feel safe. She doesn't trust her capabilities as a man to lead. So she'd rather take it on her own accord so that she doesn't have to feel all this uncertainty that you bring, which usually the issues stem from the men. And I'll give it to them. The issue usually stems from the man because I've seen so many women open up their feminine energy to a man they trust, but a lot of guys can't handle it. So a woman starts getting a little annoyed, throws a little tantrum, whatever the case is. The guy doesn't handle it. He's like, I got no time for this shit. You don't make her feel strong. You don't make her feel seen. You don't make her feel like she could express herself. Feminine energy is expressive. It's open. It's flowy. It's wild. And at times it's chaotic as hell. So if you can't give your woman the confidence that you're strong enough to handle that, she's not going to be feminine for you. You don't even deserve it. And so there's a lot of different ways that we could, man, we could chop this up for hours. I guarantee that. But I think the biggest key takeaways is you have to look for what's going to complement the energy you want to be in. And so you could also compartmentalize. Sometimes with the women, part of the work is stay masculine. That's why you're successful in business. But you have to bring the feminine home if you want to be with a good, strong, successful masculine man. Because if you bring the masculine home, you're going to get that guy that's not going to have anything to bring to the table. And then you're going to wonder, why do I do everything? Well, because you're dating a very feminine man and you're a very masculine woman.
Yeah, beautifully said. I mean, I'm going to make that a TikTok. So definitely. We have been given false information or been told a lie, right? If we do this, this is going to be the result, right? But innately, right, our primal urge, right, to protect and provide as men and to care and to nurture as women, it has either gone out the window or it has switched roles. And not saying that men are trying to be nurturers and providers or nurturers and caregivers, right? It's kind of like, well, if I don't have to do it, then I won't. You want to keep the baby? No, right? I got to pay child support. Really? I'm going to try to avoid that, right? So there's a lot going on there. It's just a wild, it's a wild dynamic is happening right now. But what I can tell you is that if you believe, if you're in the mindset of, why do I need someone when I can do this better myself? That is going to be a dangerous way of thinking, because then you're going to be always in that aloneness, right? I can just do it by myself. Eventually, you're going to want a family, right? The family unit, yeah, maybe, right? The family unit, right? It doesn't even have to be marriage. You could be spiritually together. You can be boyfriend and girlfriend for the rest of your life, or fiance for the rest of your life. It doesn't matter. The family unit is the best unit to raise a child. Not a single parent household of a man or a single parent household of a woman together, right? They need that balance. That child needs that balance, because if they don't have that balance, it's going to be one extreme. Feminism has showed it. Grandma or mom said, don't need a man, go out, get a career, get your own. That was that extreme. Where was the father saying, don't listen to your mom? That's crazy. It didn't happen, right? It didn't happen. If it did happen, I'm sure he got yelled at or something, and then it just reinforced what happened. Oh, I'm going to be the boss. So all of that right there is just leading us to where we are right now. We have two different sides right now just pitting against each other. So it's like men versus women, right? Who's in the lead, right? I'm not keeping score or anything, but it seems like both sides are losing because if we can't learn to live and to cooperate with each other, both sides are going to be used and abused. Okay, so you have your masculine girl who's on OnlyFans selling feet pics and bath water to all the losers who can't get a girl. Then you have these masculine man who's going out with these women and just running through them. We have both sides. All right, so who's at fault? And the reason is we don't understand what type of role we need to be playing. And mindset plays a good part in that. The mindset of who you want to become versus who you thought you should become because anyone can tell you who you need to be. I think you should be this. I think you should do that. But who do you want to be? Right. Because most women who go out and get a career at some point in their life, they say, I want a family. At some point, it always happens. I mean, I know people, it happens. And I don't blame them. Right. That's biology. Right. Your clock is ticking. It's like, I want to have some kids. Men, on the other hand, they can have kids at 60 and it'll be perfectly fine. We have different set of rules. Not saying that the rules are fair, but the value is different, right? Women are given their value at birth. Men have to earn their value. Looking at your story, right? You didn't have value until you finally, grew up, right? You were just in the trenches, getting bullied, getting tossed into trash cans versus the women who were getting Valentines and notes and all these calls. And I'm sure MySpace, they're getting some messages on MySpace. So all of that was happening. But for us as men, we had to go earn it. We had to be someone that they admired, a jock, basketball, football, right? Someone that they saw, right? That idea. And I want to talk to you next about the performance aspect because if we don't set ourselves apart from each other, do we excel? Because if everyone was the same, would anyone care? Or we look at someone who has achieved something great in their life. We go, whoa, that person has did something with their life. I want to emulate that. Not that they want to be that person. I want what they have. So the discrepancies, and if someone doesn't have something, they look up to the person or the people that do, and they say, that's a good thing to have. Versus, oh, everyone's the same. There's no competition. There's a huge dynamic in performance. And right now we have high performers and low performers. What do you think is the reason why people low perform and the reason why people high perform?
Tons of reasons. So many reasons. Let's jump into a few though. I believe one of the biggest things where people are high performing is because, well, sometimes it's actually out of lack. And I'm sure you've uncovered that with some of your own clients, right? Some people are so in it just to prove to the world that they are not worthless. Some people are so in it just to prove to the world that they are worthy of love, right? Some people are so in it because the standards they set for themselves are massive. Some people are in it because they want to create massive impact. They have a very clear goal of how many people they want to help and how they want to serve the world and show up. And I've come to learn that every high performer has a very powerful vision that usually is more involving than themselves, at least. And maybe I should edit that actually. The ones that are happy. There's a lot of unhappy, successful people, and it's because they do things for the wrong reason. Like, for instance, if they're acting out of lack, like I said before, where they're doing all of this to prove that, this deeper psychological issue when they were 16 that their dad always told them they sucked and were worthless. So their whole life, they're just working to make money and show their dad how great they are. But they're realizing that it's not making them happy. They have no relationships. Their friendships suck. Everything is just business and transactional. And they're realizing the quality of their life is awful, but they've achieved billionaire status. Like, who the hell gives a shit, right? That doesn't mean anything. You're not successful by that measure in my eyes. And sure, maybe that person will turn around and look at me and be like, well, you're not a billionaire, so you're not successful. I could laugh at you from my yacht. I'll be like, that's fine. You could laugh from your yacht, and I will smile from the street. And I am happier and I win. So there are all these different ways, I think, to really look at, well, what makes somebody a high performer? Because I think people have this notion that if you're a high performer, you're successful. And so there's that behind the scenes thing that we need to address is like, just because you're a high performer, are you successful? And just because you're a low performer, are you successful? But this all plays back into what you said at the start of the podcast, right? What's the meaning of life? There is no damn meaning. The meaning is whatever you make it. And I believe whatever we should make it is what makes us happy. So you could be extremely broke, extremely poor, and be happy. That's a choice. You could also be extremely rich and extremely miserable. That's a choice. I've seen that a lot of low performers have lower standards. They don't want much out of life. They're very easily contented. That's for sure. Some people are very content with certain things. I've met people that worked part-time jobs, and as long as they had enough money to pay their rent and enough time to just do their hobbies, which would be something like writing or reading or painting or just something low key, they were living their best life. You couldn't convince them otherwise. You couldn't convince them that if they were a multimillionaire, they'd be happy. They'd be like, that sounds like it sucks. I don't want to do that. I want to work 30 hours a week, pay my rent, and then spend the rest of my week gaming and playing, playing video games and doing art and drawing and calling my friends. Honestly, that doesn't sound like a bad life to me. I don't know about you. I like it. So it's really about that intrinsic standard you hold for what you want out of life. What do you want out of yourself? Now, the self, however, is very different than society, right? I'm sure you've seen the stats on the dating pools. 80% of the women go for 20% of the men. Like, why is that? Well, because only 20% of the men are extremely high value. Like, that's the truth. And again, that's not my perception. I think if a guy is making 60, 70,000 a year and he's happy and he treats you right, that's high value. But society would say no, 6+ figures. And at this point with the economy, probably 200,000 or more, a good car, and treats you right, and has a good thriving social, and has no vices, and healthy activities he does, and looks like a Greek god, and does the nasty like a stallion, right? Like all of it combined. And that's the guy you need to go for. So women are looking at that guy, and there's massive competition. High value men, we have no competition. Like, easy to pull a girl. If you're anybody under that, like, it sucks. It's just not fun. You go on the dating apps, you deal with rejection after rejection. That's why the guys are going to OnlyFans, right? You go out, you meet girls. They're like, well, what kind of car do you have? Or, what do you do for work? And most women, I'm not going to label all of them, most women will size up the guy because they are in their mind thinking, is this somebody I want to, one, open myself to? Two, can they lead? And three, if I have a family, is he going to be able to do it? And so there's a lot of like, what makes someone high value? What are the standards they set? What does society set? How do you feel? I mean, there's so much in here, man. So thanks for the question. It's great.
I'm gonna have to get your address so I can get you a stick so you can keep all the ladies away because I know you're a high value guy. So we have to make sure you are safe and that Sage doesn't see you pimping around, right? We don't need that. Now, you said something very interesting, right? You saw the guy on the yacht and he's waving at you and you're waving at him out, from the street, and you say, I won. There's a picture or story of a guy who like won the race, right? He got first place, right? He got the gold trophy. He's all happy. He's on the block, the higher block. So he's number one, right? But then you have a player who's number two. He got the silver, but he's happy. He's like, yeah, I did it, number two. And the first player like looks at number two, is like, you didn't win, I won. Why are you happy, right? Number two just wanted to complete the race. He didn't want to be first place. If he did win first place, he'd be shocked, I'm sure. But then at the same time, he's like, I just wanted to cross the finish line. And the fact that I crossed the finish line was enough for me. So he's ecstatic versus the person who's like, I'm in competition with everyone around me. And when you decide to be in competition with everyone around you, things happen, right? Now we have a bias, right? So I can only do this because I have to make sure I stay ahead, right? And that is so draining to be worried about everyone else around you versus just like, I'm good, I'm chill. You said about playing video games and staying home and just having like painting and stuff like that. It sounds nice. It's an easy life, but that's the comfort zone, right? The comfort zone is the place where many people reside because they're too afraid to go through the fear zone to the growth zone and to the success zone later on. We need to understand that we have been given comfort our whole entire life. We have been told to seek comfort our whole entire life. Go out, get a job, 9 to 5, work hard, maybe get a couple of promotions, find someone to marry, maybe have a kid or two, maybe work your way up to get a 30-year mortgage, work off to pay that 30-year mortgage. And by the time you're 65, hopefully the house is paid for and you have a decent retirement in 401k and you can retire somewhat comfortably, right? But again, until 65, you're only going to get 2 weeks off, and you have to work for a company you might not like or a boss you might not like. So you're miserable until you're 65. But a lot of people don't realize when they hit 65, the clock starts ticking down now. Most people who retire at the age of 65, they have 10 years left to live. So that means you have worked 60, or let's say you started when you're 20. So you worked 40 plus years, around 40 years. Now you only have 10 years left to be happy. What the hell happened in those 40 years? Why did you not choose to be happy during those 40 years, right? We are living backwards. We're living in this sense that, okay, when I retire, I'm going to be happy versus now I can choose to be happy. And I think this is where the performance gap is, because they think they don't have to perform. They just do what is enough. So they just do barely enough to get by, and they don't find happiness. They don't find fulfillment. They don't find true joy. Not saying that they don't have some moments where they feel good, right? If they have a kid, they feel love and gratitude, right? Not saying that, but I'm talking about the overall feeling of what life is. Do you find that people who choose to be high performers and understand that aspect are going to have an overall more happy life, less regrets on their deathbed, versus the people who just kind of stay in their comfort zone, do what they were told, have a decent life, but at the end of their life, they have so much left to do? Do you find that one is happier than the other, or one should be looking at the other and maybe taking some notes?
I think we have to have a podcast on that in about 70 years from now so that I could survey people as this starts to come more to fruition. However, my opinion on it at this point is I don't I and it's so there's like back and forth in what I'm about to say. I don't believe that everyone wants to be a high performer. And I agree. I think a lot of people are conditioned not to be. I think a lot of people seek out the comfort and find that, it's better for them. Right. But I also look at it as, for me, I don't know your beliefs or the audience. I have a very spiritual outlook on life, where I believe we're here for a reason. And I don't pretend to know what that reason is, at least for others. Maybe somebody's reason was to come here and live a very low impactful life and just take it easy. Maybe somebody's reason was to come here and impact the whole world and change a billion lives. Maybe some people are just here to kind of see what's in between both of those. I'm not entirely sure. And that's where I look at it from a spiritual side. I do believe you could be happy without being a super high performer, because that may not be in alignment with who you want to be. But I will say this: all humans have more or less the same capabilities. There are some people with specific advantages, like I'm 5'8". I'm not going to play basketball. It's just not happening. There's no point. I'm not even going to try. I'm not genetically very gifted for that, right? I could acknowledge that. That's okay. I'm definitely not a runner. I got some stocky legs, man. I ain't gonna try. And so I could look at that, but maybe I'd be a good football player because I'm kind of stocky. So maybe I'm a good lineman, right? And those are the very subtle nuances that can make me superior in certain areas. But there are people who are going to outrun me any day, shoot a basketball better than me any day. But maybe I'll knock over the basketball guy if he steps on the football field, right? And so those are the subtle things. But everything else, we're more or less have the exact same capabilities. And not everyone wants to reach their maximum potential. Not everyone strives for it, right? You plant a tree. How long is it going to grow? Until it dies, or it just can't grow anymore, right? It will reach its maximum potential. You put a lion in a field, is he going to try every single day to become the king of that field? Of course he is. That's his maximum potential. He's not going to be like, I have enough land. I got this little acre here. I'm going to kind of retire on that acre. We do that, not lions, not trees. There's nothing else on this planet or in nature that won't strive for its maximum potential. Humans are the only ones. I believe when people get upset or depressed about it is when they settle. If you know you're capable of more, if you want more, and you're brainwashing yourself that you're incapable, that's a disparity. There's no alignment there. You have this awareness that you're capable of more, but you're not doing anything. That is one, wasted potential, and two, that's going to lead to depression. On the flip side of it, you also have the people that think they want more, but they're not honest. They really don't. You got the guys like, oh man, I should work hard and be building 2 businesses and have a Ferrari and $1 million house, and blah, 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 blah. but like this dude just wants to play video games for 10 hours a day. Unless you're a top tier streamer, because you could still achieve it playing video games, but unless you're a top tier streamer, you won't get that life either. And then I could give you the solution. Well, good dude, you're going to play video games a day? Go become a top tier streamer. You could get your $1 million lifestyle and you can still play video games for 10 hours. I don't know, man. I don't think like streaming, like that sounds like work and blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. But just be honest. A lot of people don't have honesty. Just say you don't want that thing instead of saying, well, I could have it and blah, blah, blah. And like you're talking yourself up, but you know you're full of shit. And then again, a lack of alignment, another disparity. That's why you feel like crap, because you talk about how great you could be, but you do nothing. So you almost build your potential, but you don't actually want that. If you got it, you'd be miserable. If you had to stream 10 hours a day, you'd be miserable. If you had the $1 million house, you'd be sad in it. And so it's like, can you get to this honesty that you're not following other people's race, that you're not going with society saying, oh, the $1 million house and the Ferrari and the this and the that, and that's cool. Like, I'm an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur, right? I have 2 businesses. I do angel investing, advising, all these things. Sometimes I work like 16-hour days. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm still in the earlier stages. I probably won't do this for the rest of my life. I don't think so, right? But most people don't want to do that. Most people barely even want to work an 8-hour day. You're going to tell me you're going to put in 16-hour days multiple times a week? No, you won't. That's okay, though. You don't have to. And so I think the point I keep trying to make here, and I'll stop talking after this, is just people need to step into their authentic and honest selves if they want happiness. You may not want the $1 million mansion. That's cool. Just say it. Stop saying you could achieve it. You know you're not going to. Or stop saying like, oh, I'm not capable of more because of this and that. And like, you know you are. Just try it. Stop being so damn scared. Because either way, like we're all going to die. Just figure out what makes you happy and go for it, man.
The idea of knowing exactly what you want is always going to be changing. So you might want $1 million house, and then you finally get, and you're like, you know, this is too much work. Like, think of the Mike Tyson mansion, right? It has like what 55 rooms or something like that, and you know, like that's what he wanted, right? Like that's what he thought he needed, and then he gets it, and then you know he's like, and like it's empty, right? I don't want this no more. 50 Cent came and bought it, and he's like, you know, this is cool. You know, I got this Tyson mansion, right? He has it for a couple years, I think, or something like that. Then he's like, all right, I'm selling this, right? Because it doesn't matter how big it is, right? Like, is this going to suit you in some manner, right? And he found it wasn't, right? Things just kept breaking. It was more of a headache. So, yeah, a big house, it doesn't mean big dreams. Now, we can all have lofty goals in our life, and there's no bounds to what you can dream or what you want to achieve, right? You get to decide that. That's your choice. And when you were talking, I thought about something, and I wanted your perspective on this. And I wrote down, leaders are not made, they are born, or are leaders born, they're not made. What's your perspective on that?
I think that maybe a little contradictory. I think
It
both.
is.
I think both. I do believe that both is a high possibility. It just depends, right circumstances, right people stepping into your life, right willingness, right mindset, right setting event, right? The hero's journey. So I think both.
When I see this, I say, well, if we're not born into leadership, then we are just told to follow. But if we were told to follow and we chose to be leaders, then we're going against the grain. We look at the school system. The school system is not about building leaders. It's not. All right. You can look in and out. It is not about building leaders. I don't care what they say. I was a teacher. You have to understand that if a leader was born and they're in that school and they're like, this feels wrong, you don't see that. Leaders are created. But then when the child has the ability to step into leadership, they're told to follow. So now, do they want to achieve? Right? They're just told to have what everyone else has. Don't stand out too much now. Right? That's not a good thing. So it's important that we do understand that, because as a mindset coach, and I know you do mindset too, and then as a performance coach, you can show people that you have all the abilities already within you. It's just that sometimes you have to uncover all the obstacles, all the limiting beliefs, all the negativities that you were told, all the systems that were hardwired into your brain, and just rewire yourself, neuroplasticity, change the way you think, And if you don't want to change the way you think and you're happy the way you are, go for it. Stay the same way. No one is telling you you have to change. Do you want to change? And I think that's the important part. Do you want this change? And for people who come to me, I know it's going to be almost the same for you. When people come to you, they want to change, and we help facilitate that change. I want people to understand what you do and how you help them. In our last minute, share with us any last words and then tell the audience where they can find you.
Perfect. I'm going to end it with a quote. I love ending it with quotes, and I'm going to keep doing this one until it no longer becomes relevant to me. My favorite quote is by Aristotle, and I believe this is actually pretty foundational to what you and I do as coaches, right? We teach people this. Aristotle says, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. So keep on trying and striving for excellence. Do it every single day. And even if you don't feel excellent, just know you're building the habit. And that habit is you. You become your habits. That is your identity, or vice versa. Your habits are dictated by your identity. And so if you want to become excellent, all you have to do is just be it, and it'll start to manifest. I'm going to end it with that. And people could find me. They could go to my website, www.vincentinfante.life. I have a free resource on there. If you just click resources, you can download it. It's completely free, and it's a really good version of a vision board, not the bullshit one. It's a real one that I made. So I trust it's better. And check me out on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. It's vin.infante. I always answer DMs if you guys have any questions. And I hope I was able to help today. I hope I was able to serve.
Definitely. And ladies, try not to go in his DMs too hard. All right. So he's a family man. All right. I want everyone to understand that. But I do want to thank you so much, Vin, for coming on and sharing some of your wisdom, talking about what you do, helping us understand different hot topics, and telling people, right, they can strive for excellence. And the only thing they have to do is build the habit. Thank you so much, Vin, for coming on, Coaching in Session. Great conversations today.
Thanks, man.
Of course.